The procedure must have equipment shutdown detail specifications so the electric equipment involved is safely shut down before circuits are de-energized. Authorized and affected workers must be instructed in the safety significance of the lockout-tagout procedure. Other employees may need to be acquainted with LOTA procedures too, even though they may not be affected workers. Each affected new or transferred employee and other employees whose work operations are or may be in the area must have instruction in the purpose and use of a lockout or tagout procedure. Remember, these employees are affected workers. The sequence of lockout-tagout procedures is important, and all employees should be aware of them. For the purposes of this module, we will enumerate them. Number 1. Notify affected employees that a lockout-tagout system is going to be put in place. The authorized employee must know the type and magnitude of energy that the machine or equipment uses and must understand its hazards. Number 2. If the machine or equipment is operating, shut it down by the normal stopping procedure. Number 3. Operate the switch, valve, or other energy isolating device or devices to isolate the equipment from its energy source or sources, dissipate, deactivate, or restrain stored energy such as that in springs, elevated machine members, rotating flywheels, hydraulic systems, and air, gas, steam, or water pressure, etc., by methods such as repositioning, blocking, bleeding down, etc. Number 4. Lock out or tag out the energy isolating devices with assigned individual locks or tags using the methods selected. For example, locks, tags, and additional safety measures, etc. Number 5. Inspect carefully, locate, and identify all isolating devices. Be certain which switches, valves, or other energy isolating devices control the equipment to be locked or tagged out. More than one energy source may be involved. All types and locations of energy isolating means must be found, identified, and managed. Number 6. Retest the operation of the machine or system. Operate the push button or other normal operating controls to make certain the equipment must not operate. This is the verification step and must never be overlooked or eliminated. You never know when a backfeed or alternate system is feeding the machine or system that you think you just deactivated. Always check and verify. Return operating controls to the neutral or off position after the test. Number 7. All of these actions are paramount to ensure personnel protection as they act as checks to the de-energization of the sources. Number 8. The equipment is now locked out or tagged out. After completing the service or maintenance and determining that the equipment is ready for normal production operations, check the area around the machines or equipment to ensure that everyone is clear. After removing all tools from the machine and reinstalling equipment guards and determining that all employees are in the clear, remove lockout and tagout devices. Operate the energy isolating devices to restore energy to the machine or equipment. In the preceding steps, even if there is more than one worker, no matter who the employer is, every authorized worker is required to lock out equipment. That is, each authorized worker must place their own personal lockout device on the energy isolating devices. When an energy isolating device cannot accept multiple locks or tags, a multiple lockout device, like a hasp, is used. When using a single lock to lock out the machine or equipment, though other authorized workers will work on the equipment or system, place the key of the original lock in a lockout box or cabinet that allows the use of multiple locks to secure that cabinet or lock box. Each and every authorized worker working on that equipment or system must then use his or her own lock to secure the box or cabinet. When each authorized worker completes his or her work on that equipment or system, that person removes his or her lock from the box or cabinet. Group lockout-tagout refers to a leader locking tagging out for workers under his or her immediate control on the same work crew. Whenever servicing and or maintenance is performed by a group of employees, the employer must develop and implement an energy control procedure that provides authorized and affected employees with the same level of protection as a personal lockout device. Under OSHA standard group lockout-tagout requirements, a single authorized employee must assume the overall responsibility for the control of hazardous energy for all members of the group while the servicing or maintenance work is in progress. The authorized employee with overall responsibility must implement the energy control procedures, communicate the purpose of the operation to the servicing and maintenance employees, coordinate the operation, and ensure that all procedural steps have been properly completed. In such operations, it is critical that each authorized employee involved in the group lockout-tagout activity be familiar with the type and magnitude of energy that may be present during the servicing and maintenance work. In addition, and this is critical to understand, no matter the situation, each employee must affix his or her personal lockout or tagout device to the group lockout device, group lockbox, or comparable mechanism before engaging in the servicing and maintenance operation. Remember, one of the basic premises of lockout tagout is every person is protected by his or her own personal lock. This enables the authorized employee to have control over his or her own protection and verify that the equipment has been properly de-energized. Additionally, a separate tag should inform other persons that each authorized employee is working on the equipment, and as long as the tag and lock remains attached, the authorized person in charge of the group lockout or tagout knows that the work has not been completed and that it is not safe to re-energize the equipment. The authorized worker must continue to be protected by his or her lockout device until it is removed. Theoretically, the authorized employee in charge of the group lockout cannot remove the group lockout or tagout device until each employee in the group has removed his or her personal device, indicating that he or she is no longer exposed to the hazards from the servicing operation. If they can, it is not an appropriate group lockout tagout method. When the activities involving group lockout or tagout extend into another work shift, or there is a change of authorized employees, the provisions for shift or personnel changes must also be followed. The OSHA standard requires that the lockout-tagout program procedure is inspected or reviewed at least every year. The inspection must be performed by an authorized employee, designed to identify and correct any deviations or inadequacies observed, reviewed by employees locking out equipment as well as their responsibilities for lockout, reviewed by employees tagging out equipment as well as their responsibilities. Inspection reports must be kept in the departmental file for 30 years. Identify the machine, show the date of inspection, and list employees included, and identify the person performing the inspection. If an outside contractor services or maintains machinery, the on-site employer and the contractor must inform each other of their respective lockout-tagout procedures. The on-site employer must ensure that employees understand and comply with all requirements of the contractor's energy control procedures. Communication is key. As important as lockout-tagout procedure is, it can only be effective if employees are aware of the procedure and trained properly. 3 types of employees are covered by the standard: authorized, affected, and other. The amount and type of training that employees receive depends on their job in relation to the machine that is being locked out or tagged out. Authorized employees are trained to conduct the servicing and, in turn, lockout-tagout procedures. Meanwhile, affected and other employees are not trained to conduct lockout-tagout, but must be trained to understand the process and its importance to the safety of the overall operation and the people involved. Communication and organization is key to a successful and safe lockout-tagout procedure. A well-kept record of lockout-tagout tools, devices, and power sources, procedures, and leadership is vital to a good collaborative effort on the part of the entire team and their understanding of the process and lockout-tagout assignments. Because emergencies are unpredictable, it is most effective to prepare in advance to handle a crisis situation by creating an emergency action plan. The Occupational Safety and Health Administration, or OSHA, requires written emergency action plans for many businesses, and certain businesses having specific additional regulations due to their particular specialty, like the handling of hazardous materials. Beyond complying with OSHA, there are many reasons for having a solid preparedness program. This course focuses on how to prepare emergency action plans and what is involved in the OSHA regulations. By the end of this course, you will be able to explain why having an emergency action plan is important, how to identify potential emergencies, and what to include in the plan. You will also be able to describe how to account for personnel and discuss what kind of medical assistance, security, and training should be made available. The purpose of an emergency action plan is to ensure that as much as possible is done to keep employees safe in the event of a crisis. At the moment of an emergency, things can be very confusing. When things become confusing, a bad situation can be made worse and put lives at terrible risk. From a purely business perspective, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, points out that emergency action plans are important because up to 40% of businesses affected by a natural or human-caused disaster never reopen. Having procedures in place to deal with disasters can help your business survive this difficult experience. Customers may not understand the disaster and its effects on your business. They'll still expect products or service on time. If there's a significant delay, they may take their business to a competitor. Even if a disaster does slow or shut down your business, a robust emergency action plan will ensure procedures are in place to contact customers and stakeholders quickly to keep them up to date on what has happened. News travels fast, and perceptions are often different from reality. Staying ahead of the information stream reduces negative perception. Insurance often only provides partial assistance. It does not cover all losses and does not bring back lost customers. Public agencies cannot be expected to provide total relief either. Many disasters can overwhelm their resources, meaning aid may not be immediate even when it is available. Many large businesses are now expecting their suppliers to have preparations in place for emergencies in an effort to make sure their own business will not be hurt if something happens to another company on the supply chain. Without a plan in your place, your business could be given to a competitor. Like we said earlier, it is best to prepare for an emergency before it even occurs. Before creating an emergency action plan, a business analysis is needed to see what potential hazards may be encountered. These hazards can be very different or depending on the type of business and its geographic location. Some emergency action plans will cover situations that deal with hazardous materials that are present on site. Other plans will need to deal with issues that involve older buildings that were built based on lower standard safety codes. Still, others will need to have strategies prepared to react to natural disasters that would be likely to occur in certain areas because of their geography, such as hurricanes, earthquakes, and tornadoes. It is important to understand that while many things will be different depending on the type of emergency that is being prepared for, the basic preparations for an emergency action plan will be similar for a multitude of problems. For example, always provide steps for getting people to safety, whether that means sheltering or evacuating them, and always have a clear and effective plan for communicating with everyone who could be affected. Also, be sure to investigate not just what hazards may be faced and how to stay safe during them, but also what effects they will have afterward. Knowing what hazards may be faced should reveal such considerations as what lost income and increased expenses could be caused by business being shut down for various amounts of time, the effect of lost customers, the delay of new business plans, and other effects of disruption of service. Be as exact as possible in order to get a good idea of what costs might be needed so a disaster can most accurately be planned for. Once you have identified all the possible threats you may face and the potential effects, come up with responses to deal with the hazards. The plan should be in writing, and management must be certain each employee understands it and knows what action to take. Here are a few general items that will need to be included in nearly every emergency action plan. Ensure the methods for reporting fires and other emergencies are clear, whether it's dialing 911, calling an internal emergency number, pulling a manual fire alarm, or another procedure that may change depending on the type of emergency. In fact, there may be several procedures that will need to be followed in an emergency, so it is imperative each is clearly defined. Designate a person to be in charge of following procedures and for getting others to follow the procedures that are outlined. Larger companies may need more than one person from each department or alternates to act as leaders, but it is nearly always prudent to have only one person in charge, no matter how many others may be needed to carry out the plan. In any case, make sure the hierarchy is clearly laid out and listed. All employees must know who is in charge and has authority during any given emergency situation. There also should be records of who is able to perform medical care, from first aid to CPR, and it should be made sure that they are in the proper locations to do so. It is important to maintain communication at all times. Provide a means for clear communication during and immediately after any dangerous incident. In fact, at least one alternate means of communication is desired in case one is damaged in or during the emergency condition. Because electricity, water, and phones may not be available at the time of the emergency, it may be necessary to have communication systems in the staging areas where outgoing calls can be made or received. Since time is an essential element for proper response, the person who is designated as being in charge should make a staging area or area near the staging area at the headquarters so he or she can easily be reached. Identify and put in place emergency communications equipment to use as a means of communicating with the authorities and employees. It is beneficial for many employees to know how to operate the communication system too. During a major emergency involving fire or explosion, it may be necessary to evacuate offices in addition to manufacturing areas. Create evacuation paths that are clear and easy to follow. Have at least one alternate escape route and gathering place in case one is not usable during the emergency. Have procedures in place for ensuring the safety of employees who must remain during the beginning of an evacuation to take care of greater hazards. This includes employees who must use fire extinguishers, shut down gas lines and electrical systems, or safeguard hazardous materials to keep a bad situation from getting worse. A means of alerting employees to evacuate or take action based upon the situation is required. These alarms should be audible and visible so they are identified by all people in the workplace. Be sure these alarms have an alternate power supply should one run out or be destroyed in the emergency. An alarm must be distinctive so that it is recognizable as being the alarm so employees can immediately understand and comply with plan requirements. Each employee must know what to do and how to operate the alarm systems. In addition, in this day and age, it is essential to be prepared for the loss of computer hardware, software, and information related to technological disruptions. Establish methods to back up and recover all information. Finally, remember that management needs to provide whatever resources are necessary to follow the plan. Which of the following is not a consideration when creating an emergency action plan? A. The effects of the business being shut down for various amounts of time. B. Who is going to be in charge of getting others to follow procedures? C. Natural disasters. D. Procedures for employees who must remain during the beginning of an evacuation to take care of greater hazards. Or E. All of the above should be considered. The correct answer is E. All of the above must be considered. The effects of the business being shut down for various amounts of time should be investigated to get a good idea of what costs might mount up so a disaster can most accurately be planned for. For emergency situations, at least one person must be designated as in charge of following and getting others to follow the procedures that are outlined. All employees must know who is in charge and has authority during any given emergency situation. Some companies need to have strategies prepared to react to natural disasters that would likely occur in geographical areas, such as hurricanes, earthquakes, and tornadoes. Finally, there must be procedures in place to safeguard employees who must remain during the beginning of an evacuation to take care of greater hazards. Management will need to know when all personnel have been accounted for. This can be difficult during shift changes or if contractors are on site. A responsible person at each staging area must be appointed to account for personnel and to inform emergency responders of any persons believed missing. Effective protection is essential for any person who may be exposed to potentially hazardous substances. In emergency situations, employees may be exposed to a wide variety of hazardous circumstances, including chemical splashes or contact with toxic materials, falling objects or flying particles, unknown atmospheres that may contain toxic gases, vapors, mists, or inadequate oxygen to sustain life, fires, and electrical hazards. It is extremely important that employees be adequately protected in these situations. Some of the personal protective equipment, or PPE, that may be used to protect against these hazards include safety glasses, goggles, or face shields for eye protection, hard hats, safety shoes, proper respirators for breathing protection, whole body coverings like chemical suits, gloves, hoods, and boots for body protection from chemicals, and body protection from abnormal environmental conditions, such as extreme temperatures. The equipment must meet the criteria contained in the OSHA standards or as described by a nationally recognized standards producing organization. The choice of proper equipment is not a simple matter, and consultation should be made with health and safety professionals before making any purchases. Manufacturers and distributors of health and safety products may be excellent sources of information about the potential hazards involved and the right PPE to protect employees. Professional consultation may be needed in providing adequate respiratory protection. Respiratory protection is necessary to protect employees against toxic atmospheres of dust, mists, gases, or vapors, and for oxygen-deficient atmospheres. Emergency situations may involve entering confined spaces to rescue employees who are overcome by toxic compounds or who lack oxygen. These permit required confined spaces may include tanks, vaults, pits, sewers, pipelines, and vessels. Entry into permit-required confined spaces can expose the rescue team employee to a variety of hazards, including toxic gases, explosive atmospheres, oxygen deficiency, electrical hazards, and hazards created by mixers and impellers that have not been deactivated and locked out. Personnel must never enter a permit-required confined space unless the atmosphere has been tested for adequate oxygen, combustibility, and toxic substances. Conditions in a permit-required confined space must be considered immediately dangerous to life and health unless shown to be otherwise. If a permit-required confined space must be entered in an emergency, then certain precautions must be taken. Disconnect or block off all lines containing inert, toxic, flammable, or corrosive materials. Lock out all impellers, agitators, or other moving equipment inside a vessel. Also, wear the proper PPE at all times, with a mandatory use of safety rescue harnesses. Rescue procedures must be designed specifically for entry, and a trained standby person must be present. The standby person must be trained to use an assigned and fully charged positive pressure self-contained breathing apparatus with a full face piece. The standby person must maintain unobstructed lifelines and communication with all workers within the permit-required confined space. This person must not enter the confined space until adequate assistance is present. While awaiting rescue personnel, the standby person may make a rescue attempt using lifelines from outside the permit-required confined space. In a major emergency, time is a critical factor in minimizing injuries. Most small businesses do not have a formal medical program, but they are required to have medical and first aid services. In the absence of an infirmary, clinic, or hospital at a close distance from the workplace to treat injury, the employer must ensure that there are people who are properly trained to give CPR, operate any medical machinery like an automated internal defibrillator, also called an AED, or render first aid. First aid must begin within the first 3 to 4 minutes of an incident if the injury is serious. In addition, emergency eye washers or flushing stations must be properly installed and tested regularly in the event of an injury or exposure to the eye. The employer must also ensure readily available medical assistance for advice and consultation with regards to employees' health. The best way to follow through with these actions is to consider surveying the medical facilities near the area and make arrangements for the handling of routine emergency cases. There should be a written procedure for such cases. If located far away from a medical facility, identify one or more trained personnel who can render first aid. First aid supplies must be readily available for emergency use and should be ordered based upon physician consultation. Emergency phone numbers must be posted in open and obvious areas and be near or on telephones. Finally, sufficient ambulance service should be available at any given time. This requires advanced coordination with such services. During an emergency, it is often necessary to secure the area to prevent unauthorized personnel from having access to protect vital records and equipment. An off-limits area must be established by cordoning off the area with ropes and signs. It may be necessary to notify local law enforcement personnel or to employ private security to secure the area and prevent the entry of unauthorized personnel. Certain records may need to be protected, such as essential accounting files, legal documents, and lists of employees' relatives to be notified in the event of an emergency. These records may be stored in duplicate outside the workplace or in protected, secure locations inside the workplace. Training is important to the effectiveness of an emergency plan. All employees have the right and need to know the plan so they can follow it properly in case of an emergency. Before implementing an emergency action plan, a sufficient number of persons must be trained to assist in the safe and orderly evacuation of employees. Training for each type of disaster response is necessary so that employees know what actions are required. In addition to the specialized training for emergency response team members, all employees should be trained in evacuation plans, alarm systems, reporting procedures for personnel, shutdown procedures, and types of potential emergencies. These training programs must be provided initially when the plan is developed, for all new employees, when new equipment, materials, or processes are introduced, when procedures have been updated or revised, and when exercises show that employee performance must be improved. Training should be conducted at least annually. The emergency action plan and supporting procedures must be written in easily understandable terms and be made available to all personnel. A drill should be held for all personnel at random intervals at least annually, and an evaluation of performance should be made immediately following by management and employees. When possible, drills should include groups supplying outside services such as fire and police departments. In buildings with several places of employment, the emergency plan should be coordinated with other companies and employees in the building. Drills should also be based on the most likely emergency condition or conditions to arise. For example, in California, an earthquake may be the most likely emergency to arise, while in Iowa, a tornado may be the most likely emergency. Drills enable the workforce to quickly and efficiently follow the emergency action plan in a lifelike emergency setting when every second counts. Drills also test the plan itself and supporting procedures. The individual or committee in charge of emergency response should monitor the training to see where problems might exist that were not obvious during the planning phases. Finally, the emergency plan should be reviewed at least annually and updated when necessary to maintain adequate response personnel and program efficiency. The plan should be subject to scrutiny and feedback so improvements can be made on an ongoing basis. Small businesses must have a formal medical program. True or false? The answer is false. Most small businesses do not have a formal medical program, but they are required to have medical and first aid services immediately available. In the absence of an infirmary, clinic, or hospital in close distance from the workplace to treat an injury, the employer must ensure that there are people who are properly trained to give CPR, operate any medical machinery like an AED, and to render first aid. Emergency action plans are vital to every workplace. Not only do they help protect workers, but they can also help protect the business itself. To create a plan, the first step is to conduct a business analysis to identify what potential hazards may be encountered. Once you have identified the possible threats, procedures for responding to those threats must be developed in the emergency action plan. Employees must know who is in charge during an emergency situation, and they have to know what to do to be kept safe. All personnel must be accounted for, and some type of medical and first aid services need to be in place. Businesses should also consider whether security will be needed in the event of an emergency. Once the plan is complete, keep in mind that no plan will provide a benefit if simply filed away. Rather, the plan must be shared with the entire company through training. Practice drills should also be conducted to help ensure employees can quickly and safely evacuate if a real emergency situation occurs. The plan must be reviewed periodically to ensure its effectiveness is maintained.